Hello, my name is Eric Dale, and I'm the team lead for the Voice-Based Privacy Policy Consent System Computer Science Capstone for Fall-Winter 2021. Our project is a set of privacy-focused skills demonstrated using the Alexa platform, centered around understanding your rights to privacy and managing access to any audio data collected from you by a voice user interface. The project is comprised of two main components: a privacy policy reader to be able to listen through and accept a privacy policy hands-free, and a privacy manager tool to control and delegate access to your user data. So for the first demo, I want to show the privacy policy browser skill that we developed. For this demonstration, I'm using the testing toolkit in the browser, which shows a transcript of the interaction, but using a regular Alexa device would be entirely voice-based. So we'll go ahead and open the policy browser. And I can use my voice or I can type in it.
Welcome back
effectively
to the
does the same thing in the
reader.
simulator.
To continue
So
from where
because
you
I've
left off,
already
say
opened this for
continue,
testing,
or to hear other
it
options, say 1,
acts as if I'm coming back
menu.
to it. So maybe I want to see the main menu here and get a list of all my
You can
options.
tell me 1.
So I can see
Name
kind of all my
place into this
choices
menu.
of how I can
2.
interact with it.
Table of contents.
So I can say
3.
to or
Read
table
from
of contents,
beginning.
for example,
4.
to open
Read
up the table
section.
of contents and see the names
Here
of
are
all
the
the
privacy
sections.
policy section titles.
So
1.
maybe I want to
General.
hear section 1 and I
2.
could just say
Types of
read
information.
section 1.
Starting from
And now
section
Alexa will
1.
read out
General.
all of
Thank
section
you for
1
visiting
from start to finish.
coin.com, which is
Now I can
operated by
accept or
Coin,
decline individual
affiliates of
sections or the
Nexstar
entire policy.
Broadcasting
So maybe I
Incorporated
want
and
to
Mission
accept this
Broadcasting
section
Incorporated. Nexstar.
and say accept section 1.
Okay. Section 1 has been accepted.
And to verify, I can say maybe read accepted sections.
You have accepted
And
section
says that one.
1.
Maybe I can just say accept all sections and accept the whole policy.
Okay. All sections of the policy have been
And
accepted.
either jumping around, accepting, declining sections. Essentially, that is the gist of the policy browser. So for the second demo, I'm going to show our privacy manager skill, which allows users to manage the access rights to their recordings, either granting or revoking them to secondary users who can request access for various purposes. So I can go ahead and open the privacy manager here. So we have a rudimentary kind of login system, which in a real system would be real login IDs and stuff, but we just used first names for demonstration purposes. So I could say log into Eric.
You are signed in as
So now it
Eric.
gives me kind of a list of
What would you like
options.
to
I
do?
can review
Your
my
options are as
recordings. I can
follows.
look at
1.
who wants to
List
access
pending
them. I can
requests.
grant, deny
2.
access.
Review my
I can
access
seek access
permissions.
from somebody else.
3.
So
Request
maybe I
access
want
from
to
a
request
user.
access from Thomas,
4.
for example.
Accept a
So I can
request.
say request access.
To which user's recordings
Maybe
are
I
you
say
requesting?
Thomas, an example user we
Would you
have.
want to copy, listen,
Gives me some
transcribe,
options
or
for
train
why
artificial
I might want to be
intelligence
using
their
it.
recordings?
So maybe I want to say it so I could just listen to those recordings.
Is the work you intend to use these recordings for personal,
So I get
educational,
options to kind of give an
research-related, or
intention.
commercial?
So maybe I just want to listen to those recordings for my own self.
I have put in your personal request to listen.
So
using
now
Thomas's
if I were to log in as
recordings.
Thomas, I would
What
go
would you
and
like
I
to
could
do?
see that he would have a request from Eric. And actually I can just do that.
You are now
And
logged
log into
out.
Thomas.
You are signed
And
in as
now I
Thomas.
can
What would
list
you like to
pending
do?
requests.
Your current requests are.
And so
Eric
now I
has
see I've got a
personal
request
project and
from
has asked for
user
permission
Eric,
to
and I
listen
could
using your
accept that
recordings.
request. I
What
could
would you
grant
like to do?
access for specific files, for all files if I choose. And that is essentially the gist of the privacy manager. Since Alexa devices are currently one of the most common ways that people interact with a voice user interface, our implementations show how an organization might go about crafting applications to allow their users to best understand and manage their privacy rights. Our sponsor, the Open Voice Network, is currently creating a set of guidelines for privacy tools. And so our work on this project to create a sample implementation of these guidelines will help their privacy experts to validate their standards and more effectively define them in a practicable way. The use of voice interfaces and audio-only tools is especially important for accessibility, particularly for those with visual impairments or those whose eyes are easily strained from extended reading, as well as for people who want to understand their rights as laid out in a privacy policy or manage their data while their hands or eyes are busy. For example, while driving, working, or any task where they cannot use a visual interface. These tools would also be useful for organizations that want to be able to offer their privacy policy over a strictly audio interface, such as over the phone.
My name is Jacob Hilt, and I will be briefly discussing the policy reader. So the policy reader will provide a voice-based interface for users to be able to navigate and hear a privacy policy. The hope with this, of course, is that people might prefer to listen to the policy or find it easier to listen to the policy rather than read the entire chunk of text, or more likely just skip the entire chunk of text and say accept all. It will render the policy parsed from an XML format into audio using a text-to-speech engine, specifically Alexa for our skill, that will allow the user to navigate and hear or accept individual sections or the entire policy. Policy reader features include the ability to accept or decline sections or the entire policy with confirmation. So, for example, if a user wanted to accept the social networking part of a policy, but not the types of information we collect from you, they would have the ability to do that. The table of contents command will output a numbered list of every section and its title, so that way the user can jump to their specified section by saying its number. They can also skip or continue to the next section or repeat the current section. The help command will list every available command to the user, and we use the coin privacy policy as a demonstration implementation.
Hey, my name is Ethan Fleming, and I primarily worked on the privacy manager skill for this project. This is a skill that is intended to allow primary users to manage their access rights to their files, and secondary users to request for access to the files of primary users. And the features of this skill are that it allows a primary user to grant or deny permissions to specific files for specific activities to secondary users when requested, and they can revoke those access rights at any time. They can also browse the history of all recordings that they have, and they can also browse all of the access rights that they have given and been granted. Secondary users are able to make requests for database access to primary users' recordings, and when doing this, they must state the desired type of access they want, such as training an AI or copying or transcribing the text. And they must also state the intent for this request, such as is it for a commercial purpose or private or research or educational. And the skill works does all this by connecting to the AWS S3 database that is associated with the Alexa skill, and it manages all this through a simple user ID system that is just implemented for demo purposes.
Hi, I'm Bennett Wright, one of the software engineers for the Privacy Manager. The design architecture of the Privacy Manager includes the secondary user making a request via an Amazon Alexa intent. And in that intent request, they fill out the information, the reason, also their intent for using the information. And that request goes to the primary user. And when the primary user is logged in, they can view which requests they have. They can either deny or accept request for the secondary user to use their files. The primary user also can view the history of access they've been given, and they can view, again, which permissions they have to access other people's files, and they can also revoke access to secondary users for using their files.
So while we were able to meet our major goals for this project, given more time, there are definitely features we would flesh out and additions we could make. For example, we might try out another voice platform besides Alexa that has fewer development restrictions, or switch using a more traditional relational database for the Privacy Manager instead of S3. This would support useful features such as cascading deletes, which would make a huge difference in easily and securely deleting files without causing problems. We would definitely try and tackle more granular paragraph reading controls, such as being able to repeat individual paragraphs, for example, or skip around them, which wasn't easily possible on Alexa. Then having a defined XML format made parsing significantly easier, but it would also be interesting to try and get a more general parser working that didn't have that restriction. And finally, being able to give the user options for switching out the text-to-speech voice could also give better options for comfortable listening.
Hi, I'm Darian Hutchinson, and I'm one of the software engineers for this project. and I wanted to talk a bit about the development process for this project. It was a 6-month development cycle, which correlated with 2 3-month terms at our university. And the first 3 months was all about research and design. We would meet with our sponsor, who would give us feedback about what their goals were and what they wanted to achieve with this project. And we all ended up deciding to use Amazon Alexa for this voice-based project. So the first 3 months, we would dive into the Amazon Alexa skills kit and start learning those tools and reading that documentation and coming up with different prototypes. And it became clear at that point that a big part of this project was writing out different user dialogues to see how Alexa would respond with different user input. So that was a big focus of the first 3 months. And then the latter 3 months was when we really started to write code and do our programming to put all this together. We would meet in the beginning of the week, and we separated our team into 2 groups because we were building 2 different skills, and we would come up with week-long code sprints, which we used a dashboard organizational tool for this. And we would assign team members to small projects that we could get done in a week, and we would do our code sprint and meet at the end of the week and see what worked and what didn't. And it was all very agile in that way. As the project started to come together, we started to learn more and more about the Amazon Alexa skills kit and how, for instance, persistence data worked, which we needed for both skills. So we learned a lot about S3 buckets. And yeah, that was the development cycle for this project. It was 3 months of research and design, followed by 3 months of coding and development.
Our Capstone project consisted of developing 2 products, a privacy policy reader and a privacy manager for files. And we divided our team into 2 to tackle these objectives. Our first team consisted of Darian Hutchinson, myself, Jacob Hilt, and Josiah Baldwin. And we worked on developing the privacy policy reader. Our second team consisted of Fleming and Bennett, Wright, who developed the privacy manager. Often we would work in smaller groups of 2 or 3 to complete minor milestones on either project. We had regular meetings between the whole Capstone team so that we could discuss development strategies and any issues that we were having, and we were able to pool our knowledge and skills to help each other out with both projects as we learn the environment together.
Hello, I'm Josiah Baldwin, and I will be talking about some of the unexpected events we ran into. The first event was that we were unable to run the code on our machines, and the developer console only worked with 1 developer at a time. The second event was that we found out that all the speech recognition is done on Amazon servers. The developers never see a recording of it, only the transcript. Furthermore, as we were developing, we had to refine our expectations of what we can do in Alexa. Alexa cannot continue speaking on her own. She requires a user prompt after each invocation. So we had to make the responses somewhat long so as to not force the user to constantly have to say continue, continue. And then another thing we found was that with Alexa, an intent can have one and only one meaning. Because of this, that made things such as numbered submenus very difficult to implement. And finally, there were a few other things we ran into, a few other minor events that we ran into, such as the Alexa cannot play like audio recordings in the development kit. She can only do that on a Alexa device. And also another thing we found was that Alexa had a hard time parsing unusual words or long phrases.
So we got some very lovely feedback from our sponsor, which is, it would probably take me too long to read it out, all of it. And I hope it's not too small on the slide. But essentially, with Jim's guidance, we all essentially took this assignment for a voice user interface that none of us have ever developed before. And so we worked through it, continuously iterated on design to figure out what was and wasn't possible, and conferred with Jim through the whole process. And so initially we were going to build 3 applications, but actually the first one ended up being redundant. And so from there, we focused on the second 2, which were the policy reader and privacy manager. And so we maintained great communication throughout this whole thing. And really with Jim's guidance, we were able to work together as a team, and went really well. And he was very pleased with the results that we presented throughout really the whole process, but especially these end products. And so it was a great pleasure to work together.
We learned a lot of lessons during this 2-term project. This was the first time that any of us had worked in Amazon's development environment, and we encountered challenges that we had to rise to meet, both in our workflow and in the API we were working with. Because we ran frequent tests to ensure new parts of our application worked correctly, we leaned heavily on the browser simulation tools that Amazon provides, which are difficult to use with multiple developers at a time. Working around these limitations was a learning experience. We also learned the importance of user interface designs when a graphical interface isn't present. This was a new style of user interface that, like I said, none of us had worked with before. If we had it to do over again, we were all interested to know what development would have been like using different voice platforms, which might not have been as restrictive as the Alexa framework. Finally, we all benefited from collaborating in a group for 2 terms to develop this project together. Speaking for myself and most of our team, we had never done this before either. And it was really educational and rewarding to build a rapport, collaborate together, and create something that we wouldn't have had the time and resources to do alone.
So I want to acknowledge our wonderfully kind sponsor, Jim Larson, who gave our team just amazing guidance as we all cover new territory in designing for voice. His expertise and helpfulness really just made a huge world of difference in the end product and made the whole project just a fantastic experience. And thank you to our professor, Bruce Irvin, for setting all of this up, and to Portland State for offering such a unique capstone experience. And thank you for watching.